and welcome to the Town of Kiawah Islands podcast. I'm Meredith Blair. I'm a reporter and weekend anchor with Live 5 News, and I've actually covered a number of issues here on Kiawah in the recent months and over the past 6 months to close to a year now. I'm joined by Kiawah's new mayor, Brad Belt, to learn more about him and his new role on town council. Hey, Brad, how are you doing?
Just fine, thanks. Good morning, Meredith.
Well, congratulations on your new position on town council, first of all.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure congratulations is the right word to assign to the role, but it's been 2 months in now, and it's been a rewarding experience to really deal with our town staff and to begin to tackle a number of issues facing the island.
Yeah, so you were elected as town council member in 2022, and then you were elected as mayor back in April, like you said, just about 2 months ago. So can we talk about some of your priorities to start things off?
Certainly. And I think we need to distinguish between my role as mayor, as a member of the town council, which is, I'm just one of 5 voting members, and all policy matters are established and decided by the council as a whole. So you need a majority of the council to pass new ordinances. Our form of government is a mayor-council form of government under South Carolina law, and the mayor is responsible in our form of government for the administration of the town. And so one of my key priorities is making sure that from an administration standpoint, we are very attentive to the needs and concerns of our constituents. That's primarily our residents who vote in elections, but it's also our part-time property owners, as well as our hundreds of thousands of visitors that come to Kiawah Island each year. We want to make sure as an administration that we are transparent, we are responsive, and we put the interest of our community first. From a broader perspective, and this relates to council issues as well, it's protecting our unique natural environment. You live on Johns Island, you spent time around here. This is an extraordinary place.
It really is.
It's not just its natural beauty with the ocean and the marshes and the rivers. What is also very unique about Kiawah Island is its extraordinary diversity of wildlife, whether it's our beloved bobcats, our nesting loggerhead sea turtles are in nesting season right now, migratory shorebirds, the strand-feeding dolphins. These are all extraordinary natural resources and assets that I want to make sure that we do all we can to protect. And then I think a third major priority is ensuring that we're appropriately managing and planning for growth. That's both future growth, but also the growth and development that's occurring right now, to ensure that as we enter the end of the primary development cycle on Kiawah Island, that we're all attentive to what the rules and regulations are, and make sure that any development that is occurring is consistent with rules and regulations and our concepts of designing with nature. And then to the extent that there's future growth, making sure that we have the necessary infrastructure and amenities and systems in place to support that.
Yeah, that's definitely an important point that you brought up. And I know you mentioned the wildlife. I would love to see the strand feeding in person. I know you've mentioned that to me, and I've seen some videos. It's definitely beautiful. But when you mention the wildlife, that makes me think of Sam Spit, because I know that is such a big part of protecting that inlet because of the wildlife that lives there. And I know there's been a recent lawsuit dealing with all of that's going on. So can you tell me kind of what's the latest with that litigation? What's going on?
Well, it is litigation. So, Meredith, there's not that much I can say about it. But yes, the town of Kiawah Island joined with the Kiawah Island Conservancy and the Kiawah Island Community Association to initiate legal action against the current property owner to ensure that obligations that were undertaken by the property owner in a development agreement it entered into with the town are abided by. It's kind of what I can say about the substance of the litigation. What I think is worth noting and emphasizing is the town and the Conservancy and KICA are committed to, first, preserving the right of the public to access Beachwalker Park, to be able to enjoy this extraordinary natural resource, which is Sam Spit. And secondly, it's to protect Sam Spit, and particularly the native habitat that is critical habitat for migratory shorebirds, for sea turtles, for the strand-feeding dolphins. Those are our two goals.
Well, can I ask kind of what has the community reaction been like since the town did file this lawsuit?
A couple things. By and large, I think there's been strong community support. I mean, you do have an alignment of interest between the town, the community association, which covers all property owners on Kiowa Island, and the Kiowa Conservancies, whose mission it is to protect our environment and natural resources. In addition, I think there's a recognition that this is extraordinarily a true asset. I mean, I think there's unanimity, near unanimity in the Kiowa community about the need to protect and preserve Sam Spit. I suspect that there also is a view of disappointment in many respects that we've had to resort to litigation in order to do this.
Well, Brad, another thing that I've covered on the island more than once is kind of the issues dealing with the Cape and everything surrounding that development. I think there's been some parking concerns and other things. What's kind of your thoughts on all of that as far as development goes as you're now becoming mayor?
Yeah, we're in a difficult and unfortunate situation trying to address a number of issues related to development along Beachwalker Drive. There are some issues with regard to the opening of some facilities on the Cape parcel itself, which is not yet completed. People have started to move in on the Cape, but not all the buildings are finished, and they don't have certificates of occupancy for all of those. Then we have developments right across the street. It's called Ocean Pines, and just up Beachwalker, West End. Those are in what is known as the site plan review process that's being undertaken by the town's planning department. Kind of ordinary give and take in that process. A number of comments have been issued by the planning director, and the planning director and the planning staff have indicated that the applicant, the developer, needs to revise the site plans in some respects or obtain variances from certain provisions of the town's zoning code. And that would mean seeking applying to the Board of Zoning Appeals and seeking a variance, and whether or not that is obtained depends on the determination of the BZA. So that's kind of where we are. I think the frustration on the part of the developer and everyone in the community is that there are differences of view about the legal issues involved. That's not unusual and can be expected. The real problem is that the Cape Club facility, which is owned by Kiowa Partners, which is within the Cape development, is finished, but it hasn't been opened yet. The town has given a temporary certificate of occupancy to enable the Cape residents themselves to use the pool facilities, but not to open as a Cape Club facility. The reason for that is simply that right now there is no parking associated with that facility. And until issues are resolved as to when is the parking going to be constructed, how much parking is necessary, where's that parking to be located, we can't get past where we are. I can't speak for the full council. I'm just one member of the council, but I think it's important that we try to resolve these issues, and I'm certainly amenable to resolving these issues, and I think they can be resolved. The problem is there needs to be a legally viable and defensible method of doing that. Unfortunately, neither I nor can any one council member of the council as a whole simply wave a magic wand and say, never mind with respect to what the zoning ordinance said. That's not how the world works. So we've got to sit down in a legally defensible construct in order to be able to address those issues. There's a willingness to do so, but both parties have got to be willing to come to the table and make the necessary accommodations to have that happen.
Of course. Well, another thing that kind of came to fruition, or it hasn't, I don't think it started being built yet, but is the the MUSC new emergency room that's going to be, it's just right down the road, right?
Yes.
I've covered that as well. So kind of, is that a positive thing that's coming? Because is that going to be like the closest emergency room for Kiowa property owners?
It'll be just immediately adjacent to Freshfields Village. So literally a few hundred yards from where we are right now here at the town municipal center. That's a project that's been long in gestation. I think we're finally getting to the point where you can put a shovel in the ground. We're actually getting an update at the next town council meeting coming up in a couple of weeks from Dr. Patrick Cawley, who's in charge of that project. So there are issues that had been worked out with the town of Kiowa Island as well as the town of Seabrook Island. And I think those issues either have been resolved or are close to being resolved, so we can get forward with actually building the facility, which is critically important to the Sea Islands community. And this is another issue we might talk about, but because of congestion on Johns Island roads and getting into West Ashley or Charleston, where a lot of medical facilities are, it can take a long time to get there. And every minute counts in a medical emergency. Every second counts. And to have a extraordinarily high quality, as we know it will be with MUSC, medical facility right here in our neighborhood will be a critically important addition. So the sooner the better.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely, I don't think you can have too many emergency rooms. It's all about convenience. And like you said, every second counts. And you just mentioned, congestion. When you're leaving Kiowa to go back through Johns Island, West Ashley, all that stuff, is that something that you want to speak on as well? I know that they might be having some upcoming, the corridor project on Main Road.
That's not something that the town of Kiowa Island can directly impact. It's outside our jurisdiction. That's in Charleston County's purview. But there's no question that it impacts the town of Kiowa Island. It impacts the town of Seabrook Island. It impacts Lower Johns Island. The fact of the matter is we only have two ways on and off Johns Island. And with growth on Johns Island, with growth in Kiowa Island, with growth on Seabrook Island, there's a lot more traffic on the roads, more than those roads can really handle right now. As you know, during kind of peak travel times, trying to get into Charleston from Johns Island can take a long, long, long time. Going into West Ashley can take a long time. Getting back onto the island. It's critically important for Kiowa Island, not just Kiowa Island, but Kiowa Island in a number of respects. One is, we just talked about, medical emergencies. MUSC facility will help address that, because right now, in many cases, you have to, if there's a medical emergency, you're driving, at best 35, 40 minutes into an MUSC facility on the peninsula. At worst, that could be an hour and a half or so. We've got storm season starting right now, and it's projected to be a particularly active storm season. And if we have to evacuate, you're evacuating many more people than used to on congested roads. And it's also important from the standpoint of the visitors coming to Kiowa Island, the service providers and vendors, but most importantly, our employees, town's employees that work at Freshfields Village. But the Kiowa Island actually has two of the largest employers in Charleston County, the Kiowa Island Golf Resort and the Kiowa Island Club. And we've got probably 1,500 employees coming onto the island each and every day. They don't live on Kiowa Island for the most part. They live in Johns Island, Wadmalaw, James Island, or sometimes further afield. It can take them a long, long time to get here. So we're certainly supportive as a town, and it's an emphasis of mine as a mayor, is to engage with our counterparts on Charleston County, the Charleston County Council, the leadership of Charleston City, in order to address these infrastructure and roads-related problems. The town of Seabrook Island and I, the mayor, Bruce Klein, and I, jointly sent a letter to Charleston County in support of the staff's recommendation with regard to the latest mainland corridor project. Anytime you talk about roads, infrastructure, and improvements, it's going to have an impact on neighborhoods. And we have to be mindful of that. It has an impact on trees. We think that as a whole, the staff has done a pretty good job of balancing competing interest and considerations, which is why we wrote a letter in support of the latest staff recommendation. One thing I think people need to understand is the recommendation does not include widening of Lower Bohicket Road. So that extraordinary canopy that you drive down the last 3 or 4 miles before you get to Betsy Carrison, with those overhanging moss-ridden grand oaks, is not going to be changed, at least not under this staff recommendation. There are some people who would say the grand oaks got to be, be sacrificed in order to have better roads. I don't think that's likely to happen, and so for the time being, the staff recommendation is to protect that extraordinary scenic byway. So drivers just have to be extraordinarily careful driving through there.
For sure. I travel that road pretty often, and I know it is a beautiful road to travel, but it can be busy as well. Well, let's switch gears here. Can you just tell us a little bit more about you and your professional background?
Well, it's a nonlinear one, Meredith. I've spent most of my career in finance and Wall Street-related activities, investment firms and investment banking. But I've also done a couple of stints in government earlier in my career, and I'm a lawyer by professional training, but really haven't done much with the practice of law in a long time. I started my career, or spent a lot of early parts of my career in the public sector as counsel to the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as counsel to a Senate committee, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. I did another public sector stint a couple of decades after that when I was tapped to by President George W. Bush to head an agency called the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which I did for about 3 years. In addition, I've done a couple of nonprofit stints in executive positions with non-profit organizations known as think tanks, kind of a Washington thing. So it's been a little bit hither and yon, kind of equal measures, private sector, public sector, and nonprofit sector. And it all led to Kiowa Island.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, yeah, tell us how you got to Kiowa, though. What was it that brought you here? Was there anything specific, or did you just kind of find it because of its beauty?
But the same thing that brings everybody else here. It's not just the natural beauty. It is the fact that you have, I like to play golf. You've got 7 golf courses, world-class golf courses, the renowned Ocean Course. Like to ride bikes and get out and enjoy nature and kayak. Extraordinary range of outdoor-related activities. And again, the natural beauty of Kiowa Island. But it was frankly partly because of not just Kiowa, but this the Sea Islands area and the low country. Charleston was part of the attraction. It's an extraordinary city. There's a reason why in a number of polls it's the favorite city, voted number 1, the most tourist visited city in the country. It's become this extraordinary destination for weddings and
bachelorette
parties. If you simply go downtown, especially on weekends at Charleston anytime late in the day, you see a lot of young ladies around the town enjoying Charleston. It's a great foodie city, got a lot of history, and it's very accessible. And we've got a great airport, and it continues to get more access to other locations. We had been in Washington, D.C. prior to coming here for the last few decades, and it was an easy commute down here when we were not here full time. It's that combination of things that really makes this area unique, and is why we're here, and I suspect is the case for so many other people.
When did you move here? It was about 5-6 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, we bought some property in 2019 and built a house, and interestingly enough, at that point in time, the intention was still, and this again, like many other people, to still be primarily resident in Washington, D.C. This was going to be our second home. I was still planning on being very engaged in the private sector workforce. At the time, the pandemic really changed all that. We decamped here during the pandemic. Our oldest daughter was finishing her last year studying engineering at Georgia Tech at the time, and of course they were completely remote. and she was in Atlanta, so she came here. And after spending several months here and only occasionally getting up to our place in D.C., we said, this works pretty well. So we just decided to make this our primary residence at that time.
Well, I don't blame you one bit, Brad. Well, Brad, one of the issues that you brought up is protecting Kiowa's wildlife. And I know there's been a struggle or a challenge lately with your bobcats here on the island. What can you tell me about that?
Unfortunately, that is the case. Our bobcats, the survivability was threatened a few years ago because of the introduction of certain kinds of rodenticides, second-generation coagulants that they eat the rats, eat the rats, and it gets into their system. So all our bobcat population was at risk of dying away. A few years ago, we introduced a voluntary program called the Bobcat Guardian Program in the town to try to get all service providers, as well as community members, to abide by a pledge to not use any of these second-generation coagulant SGA rodenticides when applying pesticide applications. It's unfortunately the case that state law in South Carolina prohibits municipalities from regulating the use of these deadly rodenticides. I wish that were otherwise, but it is what it is right now, and hopefully will be a change of heart as part of the state legislature. But in the interim, we've had to introduce this voluntary program. It was very successful when rolled out. There's been a recent uptick in bobcats dying as a result, or at least in testing, having greater levels of the second-generation coagulants in their system. So we've had to kind of re-energize recently the Bobcat Guardian Program. And that may be a reflection of new service providers. Most service providers had pledged to the program last time, so we're going back out again. We're communicating with our community about the need to talk to their service providers. And we need to make sure that the community association is on board, the golf resort, the club, and everybody else. Probably you need to talk to Seabrook Island and others on Johns Island, because the bobcats have a fairly wide area which they will transit. So bobcats are beloved on Kiowa Island, and we want to do everything we possibly can to ensure their long-time survivability and that they thrive.
Well, Brad, is there anything you want community members, those watching at home, to know just about you as mayor or town council in general?
Well, I think the one thing that people should take away is the fact that we've got an extraordinarily engaged town council. We've got a very now engaged community. We've got a hardworking staff. We need to all pull together to address some of the big challenges facing Kiowa Island going forward. The town council recently held a strategic planning, 2-day strategic planning session. Our planning commission is going through the process of updating our comprehensive plan right now. And we need to deal not only with the basic blocking and tackling each and every day, some of the issues that arise with regard to things like bobcats, what we can do right now, but we need to plan for the future. And I would say that one of the biggest issues is resiliency. We're all here in the coastal communities and Sea Islands and in Charleston facing the impact of climate change, the sea level rise. 2 storms last year, both the Dahlia, the named storm, as well as the unnamed nor'easter in December, made us really realize our vulnerability, because there was a substantial amount of flooding. And with the predicted storm season, we've got to be mindful that we're planning for emergencies as they arise, but also how do we address these issues over the long term. It's critically important that we do all we can to protect our natural defenses, our beach and dune system, and we're looking now at revisiting our ordinances that apply to management and protection of our beaches and dunes. The same thing with regard to the marshes. We have a marsh management comprehensive plan, and our environmental committee, under the leadership of our council member Madeline Kay, is looking at those issues right now. And we've got to make sure that we're not simply building a lot more like Charleston did, impervious surface, and take away the ability of the natural environment to act as a sponge when there are rainstorms, in addition to aerial flooding. So these are all issues we're looking at, and I say probably job one going forward is going to be address resiliency challenges, and we're all committed to doing that.
Well, that's great to hear, Brad. A lot of important efforts going on here on Kiowa Island, it sounds like. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time today, and thank you so much for watching. We hope you tune into other podcasts in the future.